I'm Steven with Aquatic Pools, and today I'm here to talk about pool tile. So you just designed the pool of your dreams, you're ready to start picking out materials. Usually one of the first choices is pool tile. So, got a couple different types of pool tile. First is what we call 6x6. So 6x6 is a 6" by 6" ceramic or porcelain tile. Now this usually goes on the water line of the tile, meaning the top portion under the deck but above the finish of the pool. Next, we have what we call mosaic tile. So mosaic is a multi-piece ceramic or porcelain tile. Now usually this is old school. We used to do a lot of it. We don't do too much of it anymore, but still a good choice. Then we have glass. Now everybody likes glass. Glass is a big thing nowadays. So glass comes in multiple shapes, multiple patterns, multiple colors, and textures, iridescence, everything in between. So what pool tile is best for you? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is maintenance. So if you're speaking maintenance, meaning how well does the pool tile last, how easy is it to clean. 6x6 is going to be the easiest, less grout joints. So usually, when it comes to that, you're going to think about how many grout joints. So in between this, you're either going to use a 1/4" or an 1/8" grout joint or something in between, depending on who installs it. Usually, it's a 1/4" for ceramics because it's a bigger tile, and then for glass it's on the smaller side, grout joints. So these have less grout joints. They have grout joints right here between them. So on the bottom is going to be the finish of your pool. It's going to butt up to it, and the top, the deck's going to butt up to it. Either concrete, paver, or travertine. It's going to butt right up to it. So as far as the top of it, all pool tiles are usually glazed, meaning they have a shiny surface on the top, and that's for ease of cleaning. Now, what's the difference between a pool tile and a Home Depot tile? Well, usually pool tile, if you look at it, it's clear, right? The color's on the back of it. So the difference between pool tile and house tile is house tile, the color's on the top. So you can scratch it, you can damage it, you can do everything in between. Pool tile, the coloring is actually on the back of it. So if I were to pull this up, there's going to be a backing on the back. I mean, sometimes the tile is tinted, but usually the coloring's on the back of it. That way, if I scratch this or I chip it or whatever, the color is still going to stand. So back to maintenance. When you get up into here, you're going to have more and more grout joints. It's not bad. It all comes down to how it's installed. It really does. When we're selling pools, we cannot alliterate enough on how big the little things are. I see these pools of white haze all over the tile, and everybody thinks it's, oh my God, my pool guy's not taking care of my pool. Well, usually it's nothing to do with that. It's called effervescence. So effervescence is the material coming through the grout joint. So it's coming out of the shell of the pool, it's going through the grout joints, and it's depositing on top of the tile. Usually white, hazy white. So if you ever seen white, hazy stuff on pool tile, 99% of the time it's called effervescence. Well, all it takes is to waterproof your tile line. So on the back of here, before we put the thin set on, which is the adhesive for the tile, we're going to put waterproofing. Now, if your tile guy comes out and says, yes, I waterproof with thin set. If you hear that, if someone says, yes, I waterproof with thin set, run. That is the biggest crap on planet Earth. That is not true. That is the material that we use to adhere tile. It is somewhat permeable. Yes, there are additives that can make thin set somewhat waterproof, but usually we use Red Guard. So Red Guard you can get at Home Depot. It's meant for showers, but we've adapted it in the pool industry. So it works really good, and little things like that. I mean, it takes an hour to Red Guard a pool. An hour, and that's the difference between a lifetime of white haze on your tile or not, or beautiful, sparkly looking tile. So, maintenance is not just you picking tiles. I hear that all the time. Oh my God, I don't want a ton of grout joints. Well, if it's done properly, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So, be careful when you pick your pool guy, especially when it comes down to the little things. So let's get into, the shape of your pool. What tile do I pick if I got a really, really curvy pool? If the radiuses are super tight, I mean super, super tight, a lot of bends, a lot of curves, well, you're going to use a smaller format tile, right? That's what 1x1s are for. So 1x1s, if you ever see like a pool that's fully tiled, it's always 1x1s. And the reason is the bottom of the tank, the curves in it are very sharp. So you can't, bend these long tiles. Right? If you take these long tiles and try to bend them, they're going to stop sign. They're going to clink, 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 and you can't follow the radius. So the more curves in the pool, the smaller format tile you need. The bigger, if you have like a rectangle pool or an angular pool, you can pick whatever tile you want. There's 12-inch pieces. So, if it's straight, you can pick big format tile. Usually tile doesn't come any longer than 6 inches in a pool because pools, typically, when it comes to heights and when it comes to everything are always in increments of 6, but generally speaking, the more curvier pools. So if you got round bases like for water bowl, columns for a water bowl or something, you can't wrap it with that. I mean, we can cut this a ton of times, but at the end of the day, it's going to look like crap. You need to pick a small format tile. And don't think you got to pick one tile. A pool is like a cake. Once you build the structure, meaning the actual cake, you can ice it however you want. As long as it's done properly, you can pick multiple tiles. I mean, I've mixed match tiles. I've done rows, of tiles in between tiles to accent it. I've done, every third tile is a different tile. You can get crazy with it. You can do the spa in one tile, the pool in another, the water feature in another, and this or that. So don't be afraid to, mix and match tiles. You're going to hear a lot of contractors shy away from glass. There's a couple contractors that, predominantly speaking in the area, don't like glass. And glass is a little bit finicky. It's really hard to install. It really is. You got to use really expensive thin set. You got to take your time with it. So you got to bed the surface, meaning flatten the surface. The surface has to be perfectly flat before you install glass tile. When I'm laying this, I can put thin set on the back of this, and if the shell of the pool that I'm adhering this to is a little off, I can put it on and I can take a level and move it, and bada bing, bada boom. So glass requires an extra step. That's why it's more expensive. On top of the amount of grout it takes, the amount of time it takes to cut. So let's talk about the cost. Ceramic's obviously going to be your most inexpensive tile. Generally speaking, about $30 linear feet for this. That's materials, labor, everything installed. Usually about $30 linear foot. Usually, this is about $10 more a square foot, when you get your mosaics. So any kind of mosaics or glass, it's all installed the same. The materials isn't the big cost, it's the labor and the installation. So usually it's going to add about $10 more a square, or linear foot to upgrade to a multi-piece tile. And that's because of that bedding, guys. It adds an extra step. I just shot the tank of a pool. The top of the pool, we call it the beam, right? It's called a bond beam or a beam. So, for glass, we have to go out there and we have to use a bedding material and flatten it. So it has to be perfectly flat. You should look down it and it should be looking like that, perfectly flat. And then when someone comes, they use usually about an 1/8 inch trowel, notch trowel, put your thin set on, and then sticks your glass tile. So that's how glass tile is installed. So that's why it's more to install glass tile. Yes, the material's a little bit more expensive, but generally speaking, I mean, pool tile, if I buy this for a pool, normal pool's 85, 100 linear feet. I mean, pool tile's only going to be $500 or so. It's not a giant cost for the material. It's the labor, it's the installation. So, the tile in the pool is a very important step. It also gets the level of the pool. So it's going to set the level of the deck. So, let's say they shot the tank a little low or a little high or something like that. It's off. So when we level pools, you're going to see we use what's called a homosoap board. And we put the homosoap board up, and then we put the tiles on top of the homosoap board. And that ensures a straight line. Along as a string, we put a string line at the top too to make sure the top's straight. But it also, the reason we put a homosoap board is to get the level right. So elevations are everything. Concrete deck, 3.5 inches thick. travertine, 1 3/16" thick. So there's different thickness copings. You know, if I lay your deck low, you know, and then I run it flat to your house or I invert it, tilt it back to your pool, that's no bueno. You know, the water's going to hit the deck and it's going to go back to the pool. You cannot do that. Usually we want an inch of pitch per every 10 feet of deck. So we have to have this tile elevated correctly. When you do a concrete, most people are doing concrete decks. When you do a concrete cantilever form, the form, it's a foam form. It actually adheres to the tile, right? It's got a sticky part. So we peel and stick the stick, sticks on, and then it has a wire that pushes through, and you put a nail on the top of the beam and you twist it around. So when they pour it, they come back and they twist that wire and it breaks off, and then you pull the form off and bada bing, bada boom, you got your cantilever strip. But tile sets everything. Tile is a big step in a pool as far as elevations go, and elevations as far as water drainage is everything. So we covered, you know, design, what tile to pick. We covered cost. We covered maintenance. You know, so generally speaking, if you guys did your research and you picked a good contractor, meaning a seasoned contractor that's been through, you know, what not to do, what to do, you know, he's taken his training classes. You know, every distributor offers training classes on how to install their you know, products properly. You know, those reps come out all the time to our job sites, you know, and make suggestions on how to install, you know, their products. So, you know, that way it's warranted. Another thing that we're seeing, you know, in the industry to talk about is the warranty. So a lot of the glass tile manufacturers this year announced that they are not covering glass tile under their product warranty. And it's not because it's not good tile. I don't want this to scare you guys. It's because there's so many people using it and installing it wrong. If you install this wrong, this will be the biggest nightmare you ever did. I promise you. This stuff will pop off. This stuff will crack. This stuff, you know, you have to use a thin set with a polymer additive in it. What a polymer additive does is it allows it to flex. Due to temperature in the water, I mean, your water may be 80 degrees, your deck may be 130 degrees. That's a huge fluctuation in temperature. Things expand and contract, maybe thousandths of an inch, but it happens. So you have to allow for movement. You can't fight movement. We're in Florida. Movement is going to happen. Deck movement, tile movement, you know, shell movement. That's why we use gunite shells. Love gunite shells versus shotcrete. We'll get into that another time. That'll be a separate video. But if they don't use the correct inset, their tiles are going to be falling off in a couple years. So, you know, when you're comparing estimates, these are the things you need to be, the questions you need to be asking, right? You can't just go, oh, this guy's $69,000, this guy's $71,000, I'm going to pick the 69. One guy may be using the best of products in your pool, maybe the creme de la creme when it's done, and the other guy may be using, you know, $10 Home Depot thin set, and you may be, you know, you don't know it, but starting the biggest, you know, thorn in your side you've ever experienced. So very important, guys, you know, the details of the installer, everything, you know. So ask, you know, and we can get into different stuff. There are different types of grout. So let's talk about that. Grout, there's regular grout where it's a powder in a water, or there's epoxy grout. So epoxy grout is it's a powder in a resin instead of a powder in a water. So epoxy grout's really expensive. We usually only install it with really high-end pools, right? And it's because of the cost. Guys, it is awesome product. It is, you know, you can't beat it, but normally people aren't going to pay what it costs to do epoxy grout. So usually when the grout wears out, you can re-grout over time. It's not a huge deal. Grout isn't, you know, the end of time if the grout wears away. And grout should last 10, 15 years. You know, we're not talking about next year. We're talking about 10, 15 years down the road. And grout comes in many, many colors. You know, this is one of our color wheels. You know, we take out the dark colors. Guys, I cannot say that enough. We don't do black grout. People that do black grout, big mistake, you know, in my mind. And the reason is because black grout shows everything and it wicks. So another thing is wicking. So what wicking is let's say you have your grout and the water line is right here. The wicking means it's wet for like an inch above where it's in the water. So the water absorbs into the grout and it shows. So light colors, you don't notice wicking. Dark colors, wicking is very predominant. So we as a company don't like doing dark grout, dark finishes, dark anything. We stay mid to light. Customers are way happier, you know, if it lasts 10 times longer. So, you know, have we done it? Yes. You know, have we had problems with it? Sometimes. It's not every pool, but you know, generally speaking, we won't do dark grout as a company. So thanks guys for listening. Again, we're in Central Florida. I own Aquatic Pools, local pool builder. If you guys have any questions, feel free to call. Feel free to, you know, email us or anything. We're here for you. Thank you and have a great day.